Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for staying. I understand it's only me standing between you and your train home, or the bar, more importantly. Which is why I went for 9 things instead of 10. 10 things I wish I'd known was so last year. So let's get started. Hopefully I won't keep you too long. My name's Scott McKee. I'm the Managing Director of Bird Dog. I'm also the author of a couple of books in the B2B marketing space, covering the emerging social market as well. And that's where I met Adam and why I've been invited along to talk to you this afternoon. So it's a social project, this, and there's some contact points there for you. So if you want to connect with me after this event, or indeed during the event, there's a hashtag at the bottom there. So anyone who is socially connected, I'm quite happy for you to tweet your comments as we go along. Just for reference then, Bird Dog delivers services in 4 areas: brand, digital, content and social. The context for today's presentation is very much in the social media space, and as a consequence of that, content marketing, which is a popular topic at the moment. So let me get straight in with the first thing I wish I'd known. It's not about lunch. I hear this a lot. It's probably the most recurrent comment that I get about social media is why would I want my business to be involved with tweeting about what people had for lunch? Who cares? Who cares what you had for lunch? Well, in this particular instance, the photo that you're looking at is a picture of someone on the train that I was on, that I took. It's one of the unfortunate instances where I didn't have the flash on, but I did have the sound on my phone, and it made that clicking sound as I took the photo. But I managed to get out of that, and about 4,500 people were interested in what this person was having for lunch. So I just wanted to use that as an example of how a connected community can spread and amplify a message very quickly, very rapidly, and about the things that you least expect, including lunch. So businesses tend to use the why would I tweet about lunch as an excuse more than anything to avoid the can of worms that is social media, and they use it to avoid joining in with social conversations. But it's a poor excuse because those businesses are missing a big social opportunity. And if there's any doubt as to how big that opportunity is, well, there's some current numbers, some fairly standard numbers for this year, and you can see that in LinkedIn alone there's 225 million active users that your brands could be actively engaged with. So B2B social media isn't just about work, because that would be very, very dull if we only ever talked about work. B2B social media is actually about life, generally, which is a lot more interesting, as you can see. At work, we don't just talk about work. We talk about a lot of things. We talk about your husband. You talk about the kids. You talk about the husband and the kids. You talk about your weekends. All of these images come from social channels. You talk about your family Christmas, which can be a little bit awkward, but nevertheless available to the world. And actually, we talk about just about everything at work and on social media. So you also talk about work, of course, and social media is no different. We talk about everything and work, and I think that's a distinction that businesses need to make, that it's okay to talk about other things, not just your business. In fact, it's probably imperative that you talk about other things as well as your business. So as part of my social world, for example, I am the author. I'm the author of a couple of books. I also blog for Bird Dog and syndicate that content through other websites. I produce videos, not unlike the one we're making today, and I share my slide decks and presentations around the world as well. But it doesn't actually matter what I think about my business content. What actually matters is what my community thinks about my business content and where they choose to engage. And as often as not, they choose to engage with the content that I produce that isn't at all related to work. So a couple of years ago, I started tweeting Waterloo Bridge reports. Once a week on a Friday, whatever I saw on Waterloo Bridge, I would tweet. It's only once, but it only took a couple of times before people started asking me to tweet more, to the point where I couldn't not tweet them any longer. That's what my community wanted to see. So it involves a photograph and a smart-ass line that comes from me, hopefully, in the time it takes me to walk from Waterloo Station across the other side of the bridge. So I've been doing that for 2 years every Friday, and so far I haven't failed. And there's stuff like this. So I don't know how much you can see from the back there. My weekly view from the bridge, there's a picture of a rubber glove with some kind of Ozzy Osbourne symbol. And my line on Waterloo Bridge today, God gave rock and roll to you, gave rock and roll to you, and so on. And that kind of thing gets noticed, funnily enough. So it gets noticed regularly. There are a few keen followers and many not so keen, but they're forced to have it. This guy's called Ian Rhodes, and he's a regular follower of the opinion that it's not Friday until you receive Scott McKee's Waterloo Bridge report. And that in itself isn't terribly important. It's not that remarkable until you start appreciating that Ian Rhodes also engages with my business content. So my community is built up around a business community, but they also have personalities. They are human beings, and they get the Ozzy Osbourne jokes. But here he is commenting on one of my slide decks. One example, epic and wholly worthwhile slide share to devour from Scott McKee. So I've now jumped the shark here and gone from my connected community into Ian's connected community. He's helping me. He's helping me by recommending my material onto his business audience. And it starts to become more obvious why that's important when you have a look at his profile, and you can see that he's got about 8,000 people that he's talking to. And those 8,000 people are talking to another 8,000 people, and so on. And very quickly, your business message can be communicated around the world and back again. So I wish I'd known a few years ago, I wish people had told me that the kind of content I'm communicating on Waterloo Bridge would be more effective than the traditional communications that we're all used to. Number 2, old school marketing sucks on social. That's another common mistake that people make. They try to take their existing material and push it through social channels. It doesn't work. So in the bad old days, we had mailers or emails or advertising, whatever you liked, and that would be enough. You'd play a numbers game, send out 1,000 mailers with a 0.000 whatever % response, and as long as you sent out enough million mailers, you would get a satisfactory response. But those were tactical decisions based on campaign activity. And that was relatively easy. It's based on experience, and we have a lot of experience about old communications and not so much experience about new communications. You can't just push those same messages out through social channels. The messages have to be pulled. People have to want to engage with them. Because if you push too hard, you'll find very quickly that nobody really cares about your communications, even at Christmas time. And in a similar way, the old ROI measurements that you use for measuring success in your marketing activity also no longer applies. It doesn't work. It's another problem that people have been facing. How do we attach value to this? You can't attach it in the same way as you have been doing. So content has to have value if you're going to measure it. And that's difficult because businesses are still trying to push out their current traditional content that doesn't necessarily have a value to an audience that's worked very hard to get away from it within the social spaces. So value is measured through the communities that you create. And in a social space, that's the only thing that has a value, the community itself. So the short-term tactical approach doesn't work. You have to start building a long-term strategy for content creation and delivery for that social planning. Now, there's a guy in the States called David Meerman Scott who works in exercise as he travels around the world speaking. And it's based on a statistical response. And I thought it might be quite interesting just to do that now. So to illustrate the point that I'm trying to make. So yes, no, you can just put your hands up, it's fine. There's no right or wrong answer. But how many people in the room here, in the last couple of months, let's say, have used direct marketing or advertising as a source to research a product or service that they were thinking about buying, a business product or service that they were thinking about buying? So you're looking at marketing services or any business product or services. Who uses direct mail as a source of information to assess that purchase? Anyone? No one. Okay, that's good. Typically, it's 2%. So 2% of activity, DM. How many people attend or has attended in the last couple of months a trade show to do the same thing? So not as a vendor, actively gone to a trade show in order to research a product or service you were thinking of buying. Yeah, a couple, 2 or 3, 4. All right, that also reflects statistics of 5% typically do that. Now, how many people go online to research a product or service? Yeah, there we go. Everyone in the room, everybody does that. And one final question, how many people have clicked a link from a friend or colleague in order to research that service or product? So, yeah, there we go again. So most of you. So you can see where I'm going now. So 95% is the typical response. That research has been done all over the world with exactly the same response that you've had today. So we can see immediately that businesses are typically continuing to invest in the communication materials, the marketing activity that nobody gives a shit about. Okay? And they're not investing where clearly all the activity is happening, online and through social referral and community recommendation. It's a formative point. I wish someone had told me that a few years ago. So, is the engagement behavior that I've just shown you reflected in your non-existent social strategy? No, it isn't. Is the buying preference that the audience is expressing reflected on your current website? No, it isn't. So, I wish I'd known to invest where the market was, 100%, instead of where it wasn't. Number 3, sharing stuff is a job. Really, it's a full-time job. Sharing valuable content achieves social objectives. Now, sharing, the definition of sharing and valuable is up for debate. Maybe this is a step too far, but it leads me nicely and quickly into the bird dog content creatificator. Okay, so that you understand that the 80-20 rule that we're all very familiar with translates online as 99% to 1. I've talked about this before. A guy called Bradley Horowitz was the content director of Yahoo for a while, and he discovered that 99% of content for and on Yahoo was generated by about 1% of the staff that he had, 1% of his community. So online consumption, we all consume content. You all had your hand up earlier. 99% consumption, 1% creation. But the creation, the content that we provide in our communities is where the value is. So you're already a sheep, okay? We all are. We all consume content, following the herd, searching around Google. But what about content creators actually making more dynamic content? So content planning, recycling, distribution, all of that takes time and takes money, and it's a real job. To feed the herd of sheep that are avidly, voraciously consuming content is a full-time activity, and most companies have no one allocated to full-time content creation. They all do a little bit themselves, they consume a lot, they produce nothing. Wouldn't it be great if you actually created content and you took it seriously as a professional process, as part of your marketing activity, instead of churning out emails that no one reads? just ad hoc dicking around isn't a viable option anymore. You can still do it yourself. You should still be doing it yourself. You can learn online. All this information is available, but you're at least 5 years behind now. We've all been doing this for at least 5 years. 5 years behind. Okay, so if you haven't started, and don't worry, 2/3 of businesses still haven't, so there's an opportunity there, but 5 years behind is a long way. And if it doesn't feel like a long ways, look at the changes that have happened in the last 5 years and project, if you do nothing, project where you might be in 5 years' time. Just a thought. Okay. Number 4, social isn't free. Adam asked me to come and tell you that it doesn't take a huge budget to implement a social strategy. Well, that's not true. It does, but people think it's free. It's the social revolution, baby. That's what they said. That's what they've been saying. Peace, free love, and share it all, man. They said that as well. Conversation is free, brother. Conversation doesn't cost money. They said that too. So, if social is also free, how come it's so expensive? And it's a bit like the sign there, pants are useless. Pants aren't useless. You just need to appreciate the value. So it's not free because building a community of any size or merit requires investment, all kinds of investment, time and money. Planning takes a lot of time and effort. People seem to think that social activity evolves, that it comes from nowhere, it's just inspired, which it is, but it's better when it's planned. Talking to the world 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, all over the world, takes time and costs money. Teaching the stupid people takes time and costs money. Social planning, resourcing, content creation, distribution, engagement, it all takes effort. It's a strategic business commitment and not an optional add-on. That's how you should be looking at it. So you can still start small and expand into a social strategy, by all means. It needn't be expensive. There's a cookie that looks like Scrooge. You can and should use internal teams, internal tools and assets to deliver that message. Just don't leave it too long because you're already 5 years behind. Okay. You don't control shit anymore. This is the other common mistake that I hear all the time. Companies that are unable or unwilling to support a social strategy because they're afraid of the consequences. They want to remain in control of their brand. We've spent a lifetime trying to build up value in our corporate brands, and the last thing we want to do is have them trashed instantly online because we're no longer in control of them. Well, I wish I'd learned to let go earlier. Okay, we all let go in life one way or another. Here's our commercial director letting go on his fashion sense, for example. On another Christmas theme, we try to let go of friends and family like this just as quick as we can. We let go of our kids at some point. So what makes us so reluctant to let go of the brands? Well, the brand isn't yours anymore, and as soon as you realize that, the sooner you realize that, the better your social activity will be. So brands live and breathe and evolve in the minds of an audience. And increasingly, again, as we discovered earlier, those audiences live online. Okay, this is Jimmy Lee. He's the vice chairman of the US investment bank JP Morgan. And he discovered the hard way. You may have heard of JP Morgan in the States. They've been suffering recently on the back of the financial crisis in the States and more recently with price-fixing allegations over electricity bills in the States. So there is deep, deep public resentment over the JP Morgan brand currently on the back of mortgage foreclosures and so on. This was last month, I think, in November. One day of fines costing $1.3 billion to JP Morgan, just in fines for penalties from the financial authorities. So in the middle of all of this, they announced that they were going to have a Twitter event in November this year called #AskJPM, where Jimmy, the vice chairman, would be available to answer any questions that the public had for them. So it was an official event. He was taking over just for an hour to answer people's questions on JP Morgan. And needless to say, that caused a bit of a stir online. There's Alexis Goldstein there saying, hey, look, JP Morgan wants us to ask them questions under the #AskJPM. But she wasn't just telling her community, she was directing it specifically at the likes of Strike Debt and Occupy Wall Street. Okay, so immediately there was a negative uprising here. And the people decided that they would ask questions, but not quite the questions that JP Morgan had in mind. So how do you decide who to foreclose on, darts or a computer program? Every time another person loses their home to an illegal foreclosure, does a bell ring? Yeah, and the questions went on. Do you have a secret jail in your offices so your executives get at least one chance to see the inside of one? On the back of none of the JP Morgan executives going to jail as a consequence of the financial crisis. As a young sociopath, how can I succeed in finance? #AskJPM. Yeah, so lots of good questions. The fact that you've paid over $500 million in fines since August, is that a source of pride, or are you embarrassed it's not higher? Okay, so actually, the people decide the social agenda, not the brand. This is one example of many where the brand has to follow the interests and the will of the people and not push the corporate agenda, whatever they may think. Yeah. Ultimately, that session was cancelled. Tomorrow's Q&A is cancelled. Bad idea. Back to the drawing board. Yeah. Social media team will probably get blamed for this activity, but actually, it's the fault of the corporation for not understanding how social channels work and that the brand's no longer in control. Bet Jimmy wishes he'd known that. Number 6, respond. Always respond. Okay. I wish I'd known about the power of social amplification. Yeah. At a base level, it's just good manners. Okay, so we can start in its simplest terms with please and thank you. Dear God, restore my factory settings, please. Or Dame Edna, thank you, possum, to Paloma Faith. All right, so those are the kind of consumer examples, I guess. It becomes more relevant in a business context. Yeah. So we've got please and thank you. Now we've got love and hate. So here's someone who loves IBM, and here's someone who very obviously hates IBM. And the other mistake that businesses make is thinking that this isn't happening because they're not involved. It's like sticking your fingers in your ears and saying, la, la, la. If we're not doing it, it doesn't affect us. It does affect you. It's happening anyway, whether you like it or not. So your opportunity is to engage and manage the process rather than ignore it. Okay? And it's relevant because research is showing that the hate mail travels a lot further than the complementary activities. So some research here from Weibo in China, China's biggest, in fact the world's biggest social media channels, across 70 million tweets they analyzed, showing that hate tweets traveled at least 3 times further than other activities. So it's important that if you're going to do this, that you've got a plan. Yeah. If you've got a plan, then it can be managed properly as opposed to just letting things evolve. Cheshire Cat saying, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. It's better to have the objectives, to have a plan that you can work towards. So that's what we're working on now, is being able to plan these activities more effectively. So you have measurable goals at the start. You can start to measure activity, what's going on, brand awareness, thought leadership, brand sentiment, these alternative measures of value that as you track, you can see progress. Okay, as you keep responding, as you keep building the community, that engagement level goes up. Thought leadership goes up. That's what we're trying to achieve now. Listening is not doing. This is my current thinking. Listening used to be a strategy, okay, where companies that were nervous about social channels would just sit back and watch what was happening, listening. And I used to advocate that. So I used to say that. I used to believe it. Then again, I believed a lot of things. But it's the disbelief that slows corporate engagement, where people are just skirting around the edges. And it's no longer enough. So pressing your nose up against the window is not the same as brand engagement. Okay, we've already established this afternoon that 95 to 100% of business decisions are made or influenced online. Remember that from earlier? So listening provides a short-term tactical snapshot, but what you need is a long-term strategic goal. Yeah? Listening is not the same as doing. Another thing I wish I was told, number 8, everyone's watching. Okay? Social is global. An example there of the Earth sandwich. It's worth mentioning that social is a global activity because everyone seems to be in denial about that. Businesses seem to revert back to profiling, to try and narrow the audience, when in fact it should be embracing the diversity. Okay, so there you are in the psychiatrist's chair in denial. You're trying to refine that global social audience by profiling it, profiling the data, grouping the data. These are the things we're asked to do all the time. Segmenting the data, and even blocking the data. The blocking the data is probably acceptable, particularly when you get half a dozen social accounts all appearing at once with absolutely no activity on there. So that's okay. But it's still old school thinking to be profiling and managing the data in that way. Okay, we have a global audience that is the world. We need to assume that everyone's watching that and try and find something interesting and valuable to say to them. Okay, so you develop the community via your content creation and delivery. Okay, so you start with the world, but targeting a crap message doesn't make it any better by trying to make it more specific. It's still, if it's crap at the start, it'll be crap at the other side, and it doesn't take long for a social audience to recognize that. But the goal is a relevant community that you're trying to build. So as you develop your content, people will stick around. They may even tell their friends, and as I was talking about earlier, their friends tell their friends, and so on. And that's how you build a viable social audience. Yeah? Your database doesn't select the audience anymore. The audience selects you based on the value of your content. Last one. Social media is not the goal. Okay, everyone talks about we want to do social media. That is not the goal. Social media is a tool. We have to set other goals. That's it. That's all it is, a tool. Or a set of tools, depending on how active you are. So for social to actually have any value, it needs to have a purpose. Okay? It needs to have a mission. And it's not just about, social is not just about being social online. You'll be pleased to know that it loops back into being social offline as well. So we're in business. We're all in business, and we're trying to create commercial opportunities offline, in real life, IRL, as we say for short, in real life. And we're trying to get to a position of commercial engagement in real life. But the process has changed, how we do that. They're not mutually exclusive. So we set a clear goal at the start, and that makes it easier, as I showed earlier, to measure progress as we go along. So you know when you're succeeding. So let me give you one final example. There's my social activity, or one of my social profiles, and that's what it looks like online. Well, on the back of my online activity, it led to a conference presentation offline, okay, in real life. There was someone at that presentation who liked it. You may know him, Adam Clark. And that was the first connection. So we've gone from online to offline, and back to online again, where we started connecting across social channels. Adam suggesting there we really should meet to see if we can work together, which led to beer in real life. So online, offline. Adam says he's buying. I'm not sure that ever happened, actually, but anyway, we'll move swiftly on. Online, offline, online, offline, online again. Yeah, we had a general chat.
This is why you don't bring it.
And that led to a far more deeper and meaningful business activity involving coffee, sticky buns. So that leads to a meeting in real life, online, offline, online, offline, online, online, yeah. Offline this was, and then back online again, where in a commercial move, Adam actually helped shift some of my books by sticking it on the back of Del Trotter's truck. And on the back of this relationship, this evolving relationship, we're here today. Okay, so that's a pretty typical example, I think, of how a social strategy works in action. Yeah, so we've gone online, offline, and we're back into real life. And when I'm finished here with this slide deck, that'll go back online, okay, and be made available to other people. And so the cycle continues. So social creates commercial opportunities online and offline. They're not mutually exclusive. And I wish I'd known that before I started as well. So where's it all going to lead next? I wish I knew. There's the summary. The 9 things I wish I'd known about B2B social before I started. It's not about lunch. Old school marketing sucks on social. Sharing stuff is a job. Social isn't free. You don't control shit anymore. Always respond. Listening is not doing. Everyone's watching. And social media is not the goal. I hope that was helpful. Thank you for listening.